Welcome to Burning River Radio. And since this is our first Burning River Radio of the month, we have a kind of special announcement to make. Of course, if you read the website or follow us on Twitter, you probably already know. But Burning
Why
River
don't you
Base,
use the website?
yeah, I think the website comes first and then Twitter. Actually, but for most people, they probably just read my Twitter and don't go to the website. But beyond that, starting November 1st, we are BurningRiverBaseball.com is switching over from a everything standpoint to a minor league focus. We're going to stop doing post-game reports and series previews and weekly previews and all that junk for the Major League Club. You can find that wherever you want. You can go to Indians.com. You can go to tons of different sites and find that. We're going to focus on what we think our expertise lies in, where we have credentialed writers at each stadium, which is at the minor league level. So that's going to be our primary focus. And with that, myself and Justin Lotta will talk to you today about our top 50 minor league or top 50 Cleveland Indians prospect rankings. It's a little different than most prospect lists because in the first thing, I have a very strict rule that if you've played an inning of baseball in the majors, you are no longer a prospect. I understand they're still a rookie. Like Francisco Mejia is going to be the number one name to come up here. If he was on our list, he would be either number one or number two. He probably would have been number one. But everybody knows who Francisco Mejia is. Everybody saw him play baseball for a month, even though if they only saw 10 at bats. You know, he was with the team. They saw his face. They got to know him. They talked about him on the STO broadcasts. That's how people get to know him. But STO doesn't talk about the guys who haven't made it yet. They almost never even mention. They mentioned Mejia starting last year because of the hitting streak.
Yeah.
I mean, Xiao Chang threw a no-hitter this year. I don't recall him getting much press.
They mentioned him at the stadium for a game.
Okay, but not on TV. And like the Hillcats, their championship thing got canceled, but they won their division.
They won. They were really co-champions of the Carolina League.
They never talked about that. They didn't talk about Eric Stamets going power crazy or Connor Capel. I don't know how to say the guy's name.
Well, that's because Eric Stamets' power craziness is a fraud, but sure.
Well, but they never talked about it. In any event, they never talked about any of these guys. So those are the guys I like to focus on our rankings, are guys who have never played an inning in Major League Baseball. That is my rule for a prospect. Beyond that, every single person in the rankings, or every single person in the system is eligible for the rankings, whether they have played a game or not. And we had 2 people on our ranking this year that have never played a baseball game. And I allow it, but I personally don't really love it. Because none of us have ever seen them play. And that's kind of like the whole thing going into this is we've seen these guys play, and that's why we can rank them. And now we got 2 guys on the list who no one has ever seen play. So it is what it is.
They need to learn.
Yeah, so I think, but I think, and we rank them fairly low. George Valera is 23rd, and he's an outfielder. And Aaron Bracco, let me see if I can, is 38th. He's a shortstop that might not be a shortstop for very long. So they're fairly low in the rankings, but they're considered very highly. So as we see what they can actually do, I mean, well, they'll probably move up. Just like years ago, the first year we did a group ranking where everybody voted on it was 2015. And I was against Brady Aiken being included that year because he hadn't pitched for the Indians yet, and he ended up coming in 3rd that year. And every year since, Brady Aiken has fallen. So was he last year he was 6th, and then this year he's way down there, 34th. So that's kind of like this year's rankings of Brady Aiken is more of where I wanted to put him in that first one, just because I didn't know anything about him, and now he's kind of there because we're seeing who he is. The last thing I want to say before we really get into it is that everybody ranks differently, and that's why I like to do an amalgamation of a lot of people. So I let everybody on the website who writes for us vote in the rankings, and I take everybody's considerations equally. And I do that because we all watch different levels. So I watch the rookie guys mostly. And if I do my rankings, I'm going to value the rookie guys higher than everybody else because that's who I've seen. And you watch single A, so I think you're going to rank the single A guys better. And you may say you're not, but there's a couple guys that you ranked way higher than everybody else, and they just happen to be guys that played in Lake County either this year or last year. So I think, like, you may not be doing it intentionally, but I think that's there. And I think Gavin rates the AA, AAA guys higher. So I do think, I think there's some bias.
In fairness for Gavin, he should rank AA and AAA higher because those are the guys, anybody playing AA, AAA, if they have any potential, those are the guys that deserve to be ranked higher.
Okay, so that's the second part of this. It's not just who we saw, but it's also how you value prospects. I personally value them ceiling first. That's why Tristan McKenzie for me has been number one every year we've done this, because to me he has the highest ceiling of any player. It doesn't matter that he's not going to be on the team next year. He has the highest ceiling, and I don't even think I didn't rank Nelly Rodriguez this year, who could be the closest to the majors. Like, I mean, he could be the Jesus Aguilar of the last couple of years. I mean, there's no reason he's not learning anything else in AAA. He had a terrible season. But a guy like that, I'm not going to rank at all because in Ronnie Rodriguez, I ranked very poorly because to me, guys like that have such a low ceiling that it doesn't matter if they do make it to the majors. They're never going to be much of anything.
That's where we differ. See, when I do the rankings, I try to balance mine out. Like, obviously, ceiling matters, and I had McKenzie number one. I had McKenzie number one last year, like you did. But I try to balance it with the floor too, because I think there's a lot of value. Like, it didn't pan out for him, but a guy last year, I don't think yeah, it looks like Todd Hankins fell out of our top 50, correct?
Yeah, I don't believe he's in the top 50 at all.
So
and I don't know that I ranked him in my top 50 either, personally.
I didn't. I actually did.
No.
Okay, I didn't.
I had him like
at all.
I had him like 65. I mean, it was no 72.
Okay.
I had
Eric Stamets is another good example too. But even before he had this, whatever power spike he saw this year, before that, he was worth ranking for defense because you knew he was a guy that was going to eventually make the major leagues based on his defense at shortstop, and then he could play second, probably third. So I think I always take into account the likelihood of the player's potential to get to the major leagues, regardless of his upside. If there's a guy that has a chance to even be, a 0-win player at the major league level for 100 at bats, 150 at bats, or even in the field or for 50 innings, can be a 0-win player. There's value in that because it's an internal guy you drafted that you didn't have to go out and sign off the waiver wire, or you didn't have to pay extra money to come in and hold down a position. Having a guy like Eric Stamets prevents you from having to bring in a Michael Martinez, or even though he doesn't matter, he didn't make a lot. But my point is, even if they're worth, especially if they're worth more than they're above league average. If there's a guy that's worth half a win, even a win, even in one season, and he makes it and he fills a role for a season, that has a lot of value in terms of a draft pick, because any draft pick that you get production from in a positive direction is an absolute win for your scouting team, your drafting, and all that stuff. And I think there's a lot of value in that. So I also try to take that into consideration. Obviously, like I said, McKenzie has a ridiculous amount of upside. I still think the floor for him is pretty good. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So we can get into
talking. To balance those two things out.
Yeah, we can get into talking about our actual list now. I guess if you want to, we won't read through the whole list because that'd be kind of tedious. If you want to see the whole list, it was published. In groups of 10 initially from November 1st to November 5th. But on November 7th, we had the top 50 come out as one single list. So if you want to look through, there is a version that is just the top 50 players, and it's just names going down But if you go back before that, you can read descriptions and see pictures of pretty much everybody. At this point, they're almost all my pitchers. There's a couple of pitchers from Akron, but almost all of them are when they came to Arizona, which is a great thing about living in Arizona is they all have to come here at some point, whether it's an AZL, AFL, or just minor league spring training. All right, so everybody except for Mike, who is a Tool, and we don't really need to mention his rankings anymore because he was just being a troll, I believe, in his ranking. So everybody else picked Triston McKenzie number 1. And I think him, along with Francisco Mejia, I personally believe that they are the only 2 Indians prospects. I guess you can throw Greg Allen in there too if you want to call him a prospect. Those are the only prospects I see as... No, I'm going to take Greg Allen out of it. I think McKenzie and Mejia are the only potential all-stars that I really see. Like where you see them in the minors and you're like, this guy is going to be an all-star someday. He's going to be one of the best players in franchise history. I think those 2, and that's it. I don't see anybody else. So on this list, I think Triston McKenzie is the only guy that I'm comfortable saying, yes, this player will be an all-star. He will not only start in the majors, but he will be an all-star in the majors.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say anybody else. I mean, there's guys who have all-star
There's potential.
upside. Yeah,
Everybody's got potential.
There.
But the only one I'm confident saying that about is McKenzie. And there's very few guys in the past that I would have said that about. Danny Salazar was one. Jason Kipnis was one I was really high on.
I would have said it for Clint Frazier.
Everybody was on Lindor like that, obviously. Lindor was like the first guy that everybody went crazy for. But we started the site before then, and we were all really high on Kipnis at the time. So very rarely does somebody come up like this, and you're like, yeah, he's the guy, and that's the guy. And I think overall the rankings are weak. I think when you get out of the top 10, you're really not looking at people who even have major league starter ability for the most part. And even in the top 10, it's not that strong. So McKenzie was obvious number 1. Number 2, down the line, with the exception of myself, everybody had Bobby Bradley. So Bobby Bradley ended up coming in 2. And I feel like I've seen Bobby Bradley play more than anyone else, and I had him at 3.
I saw him at Lake County a good amount 2 years ago, and then I got to see him a few times at Akron this year in person. And
that's good. I saw his
MILB TV.
I saw his first entire season in AZL, where he won the MVP and the Triple Crown.
Well, and the team won now too.
And I'm watching him now. And watching him now is why I didn't put him second. Not because of when he won the MVP in the Triple Crown. He just swings at everything. The guy cannot hold back at all. And but that's not fair because Francisco Mejia swings at everything too. Like today, I think he had three pitches in his first 2 at bats, and he caused 3 outs. He grounded a double, or first 2 at bats. Saw 3 pitches, got 3 outs. Double play and a ground ball out. But he makes contact on almost everything. Bradley swings at everything and he misses.
I think you're being a little unfair though with recency bias because you're saying that he swings everything and misses, but you're seeing him in a month sample size in Arizona right now. And if you look at what he did this entire season,
I looked at but I looked at his numbers too. His strikeout rate is vastly improved over last year.
Right.
But his walk rate is
you can't sit there and say that based on a 1 month sample size, he's still that bad and ignore what he did at AA at age 21 for a whole season and where he cut his strikeout rate. I think that's unfair to overlook.
Well, and that's why he's second. And to be fair, I still had him 3rd. It's not like I had him 15th or something. I had him 3rd. So it's not like I was going crazy. I happen to like Shane Bieber, who I've never seen pitch. So that's going completely off of stats.
I think that's a case to me where his floor is safer than Bradley's.
Absolutely. And that's my worry about not just Bobby Bradley, and we probably won't talk about him a whole lot, but Oscar Gonzalez, who I've seen a lot of, is, I mean, like all these guys, I see them and they remind me of like Adam Dunn and Mark Reynolds, where they swing from floor to ceiling, like they're swinging straight up. They've got that launch angle thing down, and they've got the exit velocity too. They just have to make contact with it.
That's
And
and
I
that's
don't think
scary to
Oscar
see
Gonzalez is ever.
at his level too.
I don't think Oscar Gonzalez is ever going to learn the strike zone. I have no confidence. I think Bobby Bradley will.
It's pretty rare to see a guy strike out that much that low in the level, and to see him
Yeah, nobody
improve. I
does
mean,
that in AZL. Like if you look at Bobby Bradley's strikeout numbers in AZL, he was fantastic.
right.
So for
Generally,
Gonzalez to do that,
strikeout rates get worse as you move up, not better.
mm-hmm.
With a few exceptions, like Clinton Frazier, because of his talent, improved his strikeout rate from low A to high A to double A. He just because he's that good, and he was also 18 or 19 years old when he got into the league.
Yeah, and
Bobby
I have
Bradley got a little better this year, and that was encouraging. That's what kind of scares me about Eric Haas. I'm kind of jumping ahead a bit, but it's hard to look up if you look at guys in the league who might have struck out 30% of the time, like Eric Haas's strikeout rate was 30% in Double A this year. There's not a lot of precedence for guys to have success in the major leagues
yeah,
who
I want
struck
to
out
say
that much.
I have a piece coming out soon about Bobby Bradley specifically. We'll be looking deeper into all of the top 10 guys on the list. And in Bobby Bradley's, I went back and looked and to see if I could find someone who struck out like him and went on to play in the majors. And I looked up a lot of the guys who've recently struck out like him in the majors, like Chris Davis, Mark Reynolds. I can't remember who else I looked up. There were 3 or 4 guys I looked up. Aaron Judge was one of them. None of them struck out in the minors like he is striking out.
Mm-hmm.
And that
That's
worries
the
me
hard
because
part.
like if Aaron Judge struck out 200 times in the minors, I'd be like, well, he just struck out 200 times in the majors. So it's like the same thing, but it's not. He's way worse in the majors than he was in the minors. And that's
And
why I worry
you're
about
not going to get better. I mean, if you strike out 200 times in Double A, you might strike out 250 if you have major league at bats.
Yeah, and that's another. Will Benson is another one. We don't really need to talk about him a whole lot, but he came in 10 in our rankings. I ranked him 18th because I know he's got a lot of hype because he was a first round pick. But he just swings and misses too much. Now he's a better defender. Well, Bobby Bradley's a great defender at first,
He
but
is.
a great defender in right field is worth more than a great defender at first base. I personally think so, especially because Benson has a great arm.
I had
And
Benson at 10, or I
now
had Benson at
that's where
10.
he finished.
What's that?
That's where he finished was 10. Yeah, you have him
Yeah,
at 10.
that's where I had him, and I didn't see him this year, but
Well, he
I
was in
kind of
Mahoning Valley.
right, and I kind of went on the fact that he finished the year with an OPS above 800 after a pretty bad start. So I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt that he made some changes, or is starting to figure things out a little bit. He was pretty god awful against left-handers. He had a 668 OPS against lefties, but he had an over 800 OPS at age 19 in his first year in an affiliated ball. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there.
Well,
But
the funny thing is, you can't say the guy doesn't care because one of my favorite stories of Benson is him in the duck. He was on the bench for one game when he was in the AZL, and Junior Soto got hurt. He had hurt his leg somehow, but he was starting anyway, and he hit a single that should have been a double, but he had to stop at first because his leg was bothering him. So they knew he was the guys on the bench knew it. They were going to take him out. And Benson is jumping up and down like, put me in, and they didn't. But like, just you could see him like, I need to get in this game. I can't be sitting on the bench. I got to be out there playing. And I appreciate it. When he got on the bases, he ran the bases really well. He always ran hard, which is not something I would say about somebody else who first pick, not necessarily first rounder this year. But
no,
so he really puts that effort out there all the time. So I do feel like he can improve because of that. Man, the strikeout thing bothers me. And I get where some people say you're not supposed to care about strikeouts, but I feel like the advanced people actually care about strikeouts more. Because when you look at like how you evaluate a pitcher, the first thing you're looking at is how often do they strike people out? How often do they get swing and misses? It doesn't matter how hard they throw necessarily, as much as how often they're striking people out compared to how often they're walking them and things like that. Whereas for a hitter, you're willing to give up some of that if they have great power numbers to make up for it. But if they don't have those power numbers, it's hard to, say that it's okay to strike out that often.
well, strikeout rate in the minors matters because it's usually a pretty good predictor of future performance. Strikeout rates for both pitchers and hitters translate pretty well to the majors, and obviously there's a translation. There's a correlation. I forget who does it, but there's like a correlation where it runs the numbers. If you strike out X amount of times or an X percent of the time in the minors at a certain level, you're expected to strike out a certain percentage of the time in the majors based on that calculation. So those numbers generally are a better predictor of the future for players than anything else they do in the minors. So strikeout rate matters. And that's why we keep talking about.
Yeah, and it's completely different.
Guys like that who strike out a lot down there.
Yeah, and it's completely different than complaining about Aaron Judge striking out, where the guy's possibly going to win MVP. Like it's you can strike out if you're going to win MVP. You can't if you're in single A or short season Mahoning Valley. I want to talk about number 3, Shane Bieber, who was my number 2. And Kate had him number 4, you had him number 3. I think it was pretty much between. He was in the top 5 for everybody. Why? I've never seen him pitch.
So, I mean, no, I think the easiest thing to look at with Bieber is the fact that he doesn't walk anybody. I have to look at his walk rate again. I think he might have walked like 5 guys at Lake County before he got promoted. I mean, essentially, what puts him on the map is the fact that he went 2 levels up this year. He started the year in Lake County, ended the year in Akron. Yeah, he had a.
And I love that. I love the aggressive advancement. It doesn't happen very often.
It makes sense. He had a walk rate under 1% at Lake County, a 1.1 walk percentage at high A in 90 innings, and then he went to Double A for 54 innings and had a 2.3 walk rate. To put that into context, Josh Tomlin, who obviously walks the least amount of people on anybody on the what?
Well, he leads the league almost every year.
Yeah, and Josh Tomlin didn't have walk rates this low in the minors. I looked it up a few weeks ago when I was looking at Bieber's numbers, and Josh Tomlin had walk rates like 5% in the minors. So Bieber has even better command than Tomlin. And
right now,
it was a little bit harder. There were reports this year that Bieber was when he came out of the draft, most people had him about 89 and 91, and this year there were some starts where people had him in the 92 to 93 range, which is a huge jump for him because he's already got pretty good command. I don't know if he's got a ton of great pitches as far as, pitches that are going to make you swing and miss. But he commands 4 pitches, and if he's throwing 92, 93 with the command he has, that's a pretty big improvement. I mean, once upon a time, Josh Tomlin threw 90, 91, and has obviously lost the velocity a bit, but he still has great command.
And I think this is probably then one of your floor picks, more so than the ceiling, because there are guys that have.
Him was the floor number 1 because they knew he could throw strikes.
So, I'll just pick a couple random names off here: Francisco Perez, Sam Hentges, and Brady Aiken are 3 guys that I think have super high ceilings, and they're all in our top 40.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know that any of them will make it to the majors ever.
No, and I think we can safely say Bieber pitch the majors.
Is at least going to make it to the Ryan Merritt level.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that at this point. So that's why a guy like Hentges, who could be number 3, is way down.
Yeah, I think having him number 3 in our list though may confuse people. So I want to explain: he is not an ace. He doesn't project to be your number 1 starter. He's just he projects to be a major league starter, which is so much better than anything else on this list because there's no one else on this list other than McKenzie who projects to be a major league starting pitcher. That's how bad the list is, I think.
there's nobody in the Indians organization, I think. I don't even know. I mean, there's some guys that are pretty far away. You just don't know.
Well, I mean, we can skip down to 11.
As of right now, there's not a guy on this list that looks anything remotely above a mid-rotation starter besides McKenzie. McKenzie is a potential future number 1, and nobody else even comes close to that in this system.
Yeah, and I get in this argument with Gavin. Where did you rank Francisco Perez?
I had Perez. I was a little low on Perez and everybody because
you had him at 31. Well, Gavin was mad that he was in our top 20 And I don't think Gavin ranked him at all. And his comment back to me was some snarky thing about how he doesn't care about a guy who hasn't pitched above low A yet. And
well, when you're ranking 50 guys, that's bound to happen. You can't rank.
But I ranked him 11th.
Players who, I mean, what are you going to do? Rank Jordan Smith? You can't rank Jordan Smith or Mitch Brown again.
I ranked Francisco Perez 11th. Kate ranked him 10th. We are the only two people who have seen this guy pitch.
Right.
So that should tell you something, that maybe we've seen something beyond the stats. And what I saw was what Brady Aiken was sold to us as, which is a guy who can throw 92, 93, and then drop a 70-mile-an-hour curveball that just is devastating. And he can throw it for strikes and actually get guys to swing and miss it, which Aiken cannot throw his curveball for strikes, and he can't throw his fastball at 92, so he can't get people to swing at the curveball in the first place. Perez can, and that's what I saw, and that's why I ranked him where I did. And so that's why I think he could be a number 2, number 3 starter. I think he's, as far as ceiling, I have him number 2 behind McKenzie. If you want to talk about top.
I mean, I haven't seen him enough to even.
Well, that's my point. Nobody's seen him except me. That's kind of why we have to do this. And we're running kind of long time, so we'll go through the top 10 real quick. I don't think there's anything crazy here. Nolan Jones is 4. He's now a third baseman down in short season A. Yu Chang is a shortstop who I think should be a third baseman. He's 5th. Willie Castro is a shortstop who I think is going to be a second baseman. He's 6th. Aaron Saval is another starting pitcher I never saw because he skipped AZL. He's 7th. Andrew Kalika also skipped AZL. He's a center fielder. I believe he was with Lynchburg. He's 8th.
Kalika was only at Lynchburg.
What? I just said Lynchburg.
Oh, that was the only level he was at.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Okay.
Eric Stamets was at AAA, a shortstop we talked about, and Benson then is 10th, right field. I will say that then Julian Merriweather was 11. Ben Krauth is number 12, and that's too high for Ben Krauth.
And you like Ben Krauth. You're a big fan.
I ranked him that high. It's too high for him because he's a relief pitcher, and because he throws 88 miles an hour.
Well,
and if you're talking about a major leaguer being a left-handed relief pitcher who throws 88 miles an hour, that doesn't seem like something that will succeed, but I think he will because he only throws strikes and he doesn't give up home runs.
I mean, you can get away with it as a left-hander if you're a matchup guy. Let me ask you this: out of the top 10, what ranking do you disagree with the most, and who do you think should be in the top 10 that's not?
Nolan Jones may be a little high, but I ranked him up there too. Mm-hmm. It's so hard. His defense has really fallen off in the last year, and that's what he's supposed to be best at. And you want me to say Haas, but I'm not going to say Haas. I don't know if there's somebody, maybe Francisco Perez. Honestly, that's
fair. Because of the upside, that's fair.
I mean, I had Perez above Will Benson, but I also had Chao Ching Chiang above Will Benson and Tyler Krieger and Matt Esparza and Tanner Tully. Like, I had a lot of guys above Will Benson.
And you want? I was not going to.
Who do you want out? Because you want Eric Haasen. We get it.
I think Eric Haas is a top 10 guy. I don't agree with Kalika or Stamets at all because number one, Eric Stamets, great defender. Maybe the power's for real, but if you look at his numbers at Columbus, which is a big hitter's park where home runs tend to get inflated there because of the short field. Mm-hmm. He had, I think, a majority of his home runs there. I think he had 4 on the road.
Let me say something before. Okay. Mm-hmm. Last year, I don't have this year's MLB Top 30 in front of me, unfortunately. Last year, number 9 on MLB's Top 30 was Eric Gonzalez. And if you're going to tell me that Eric Gonzalez is better than Eric Stamets, I'm not going to believe it.
Oh, I do. I absolutely do.
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, that's your choice then. But I'm just saying they had Nelly Rodriguez 24th. Like they do this.
108,
they rank those guys they think are going to make it up.
182 at bats for Stamets in Columbus, 615 slugging at home. on the road, 152 at bats, 263 slugging. That is a huge, huge gap. So that makes him believe the power isn't for real. He's a glove only prospect, and Gonzalez's bat is way better than Stamets.
I will say Stamets last year, what was he? He was ranked 49th. He was barely in the top 50. His jump of 40 was the second highest, it looks like, to Matt Esparza jump 42 spots.
Yeah. I mean, Stamets is a good
it was
prospect.
A huge jump.
He's not.
And to me, it was because he has major league utility infielder. He's Johnny McDonald, like minimum. He's a better defender to me than Eric Gonzalez is at shortstop, at least. Gonzalez can play first base and outfield, which Stamets doesn't really do. But Stamets can play second base, shortstop, third base if he has to.
I haven't seen.
And to me, like that floor thing. It's not. I've seen him play in spring training. He got into major league games and he was in major league practices all year. So I actually saw him in the same rotation as Eric Gonzalez. So I got to see, Francisco Lindor, Eric Stamets, Eric Gonzalez in a row. And you can kind of glean some stuff from that.
I mean, Stamets is a fine prospect, but for me, in this system,
I try to say he's not in the top 10. Again, we're talking about a floor thing, whereas someone like Willie Castro probably has that same floor, but has a much higher ceiling, and he's 3 spots above him.
The other one I'll disagree with too, as I said, I would have Haas in the top 10. I had Haas number 4, which is obviously a little aggressive, and also going back and looking at his strikeout rate, it's hard to find a good comparison for him to a guy who's had major league success and also struck out 30% of the time.
And Gavin is also in love with Haas, and he had him 7, and that was the second highest anyone had.
And then I personally had Connor Capel in my top 10 and not Kalika, because I think a lot of people overlooked what Capel did offensively this year in Lake County in the second half. He struggled to start the season early, but a lot of things people said he could do coming out of the draft, he finally showed in the second half. And obviously I saw Capel more than anybody, but I think he's a top 10 talent. And I don't think
you saw him more this year than anybody, but I saw him a lot last year. And I will fully admit that there's some bias there because he looked awful last year. And a guy can.
He was awful to start the year this year too. He was not good in the first half.
He's ranked 27th. Right ahead of him is Quentin Holmes. Quentin Holmes looked terrible this year. So, and I had Capel ranked above Holmes. I have a lot of guys ranked above Holmes that were not in the final rankings because I saw Holmes and I saw him not hustle. He's supposed to be the fastest guy in the class. He was not the fastest guy on the field. Trey Gant was the fastest guy for the AZL Indians this year. Tyler Freeman was the best hitter. And we had him as where is he? He's 15th on our list. And I was the only person who saw him play. So I thought that was pretty aggressive for other people to vote him that high, as well as where I didn't even have him that high. Everyone else did. But I was really disappointed with Holmes this year. Just like I was, at least somewhat disappointed by Benson. But at least Benson was pushing it every play. It seemed like Holmes was dogging it half the time. And I saw him out a triple, so I know he can run. I know it's there, but he wasn't doing it. I don't know. Maybe it's 110 degrees. He doesn't like it. But to me, you should be playing all out at AZL. Because a lot of guys don't make. The first round picks make it out, but a lot of guys don't make it past AZL. A lot of draft picks don't make it past AZL.
I think we're
real quick before we finish.
Yeah,
really quick before we finish, I wanted to go through this little thing I made. Of the top 50, 15 were starting pitchers, which is about right. 9 were shortstops. And then no other position had more than 5 players.
Well, that's obviously because of the importance of the position.
Yeah, and I wrote we're doing a bunch of depth chart diving pieces, which are going to look into each individual position, and I believe probably many of those shortstops are going to end up switching to another position. There were only 2 third basemen and 3 second basemen on the list. I think a lot of those shortstops are going one way or the other. And I think at least a few of those pitchers will be going into the bullpen if they ever want to make it to the majors.
I think Aaron Savali is probably the the one guy on that list who's going to wind up being a reliever in the top 10.
I had a few guys I had picked out that were left-hand relievers that I thought would probably make a nice transition up. One of them is Rob Kaminsky, who was late. I don't think he's ever going to be able to start. I think Xiao-Ching Chiang as a ground ball specialist could be an interesting bullpen guy.
Like a Dan Otero, yeah.
Yeah, and Sam Henkes. I mean, the lack of control isn't something you want to mess with, but I mean, him and Sean Brady, I think, was the other one I had said.
Well, yeah, you're seeing a lot of him right now. Obviously,
yeah. And I think
was
Sean,
I the only
Sean
one
Brady's
to rank Anderson Polanco again?
Yeah.
And I had him at 44, so clearly I'm the only one who believes in Anderson Polanco.
And then, of course, the weakest position, kind of, is first base, where there's only one player ranked in all of first base. And we did the positional rankings this year for first base, and I remember having a hard time finding.
It was bad.
Nelly Rodriguez, he would have been the second. Well, it depends. Mike Poppy was included on our first baseman rankings, and so was Ronnie Rodriguez, because we needed names to put in there. But both those guys made the list in other positions. Poppy's a right fielder, and Rodriguez is an everything. But like Chris DeJesus is a free agent, so he's gone. Nelly Rodriguez, I can't imagine he'll be around a whole lot longer, especially once Bobby Bradley makes it to the majors. I mean, maybe they move somebody over there from some other position, but man, it's an ugly hole there, and a terrible time to have an ugly hole at first base when your first baseman is looking to make $60 million in free agency.
And I don't even know how they're gonna. This is for a future podcast, but I want to know who's gonna play first base at AAA. Is it gonna be Bradley or Rodriguez? Because it should be Bradley at this point, but
yeah, it should be. I think that's why he's in the AFL right now, and we will cover all that. We're gonna do another podcast coming out either this week, early next week. We'll see. In a few days, we'll have another podcast out, and that one will focus more on what's going on right now with the Cleveland Indians, and not necessarily these minor league prospect rankings that we have been focusing on today.
Is there anything else you want to add then real quick about?
Nope. I think that's it. Like I said, if you have any comments on it, complaints, tell me where we got it wrong. Obviously, there's going to be people. No one's going to be happy. Justin's not happy with the list. I'm pretty happy with the list. But if it's not your list, you're not going to be 100% happy with it because other people made it. And so, especially when you compromise, you're never going to make everybody happy that compromised. That's what a compromise is.
Well, I think your list and my list are the only ones I can look at and see where things match up a little better.
Pete's.
No.
It doesn't matter. All right, so we'll see you next time, and go try.